Imagine the following. You are walking on a busy street, surrounded by glass and concrete buildings, the constant sound of cars, cell phone notifications, and hurried footsteps. In the midst of this modern scene, you pass by an ancient church, almost hidden among the skyscrapers. For a moment, something makes you stop. Maybe it's the contrast between the noise of the world around you and the silence that seems to emanate from that building. Or maybe it's your conscience whispering a question you don't want to hear, but need to. What am I really searching for? This question seems simple, but it carries an enormous weight, doesn't it? We live in a world where everything is instantaneous. Social media shows us the best versions of people. We want to be seen, noticed, admired. And spirituality? Well, it seems to be competing for space in this chaos, often reduced to a checklist of appearances and commitments. But let me tell you, something you might not know. Studies show that globally, fewer people identify with organized religions. In the United States, for example, the Pew Research Center revealed that the number of people without religious affiliation grew from 16% in 2007 to nearly 30% in 2021. On the other hand, the search for personal spirituality, for something that goes beyond the superficial, is growing. Curious, don't you think? It's as if, amidst all the noise, people were desperate for a kind of silence that truly makes sense. But why am I telling you this? Because honestly, I think that many times we are living a life of appearances and we don't even realize it. We are so busy trying to impress, whether with our work, our appearance, or even our faith, that we end up losing ourselves in the process. And this reminds me of a verse that, honestly, moves me every time I read it. Matthew 7:21-23. Have you heard about it? He says that not everyone who calls God Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. Do you know what's scary? He speaks of people who prophesy, perform miracles, cast out demons in God's name. And yet he says, I never knew you. Let me repeat that, I never knew you. Those words give me chills, because they are not talking about people who reject God, but about people who believe they are doing the right thing. They are acting, but are they being authentic? Are they living a faith that truly transforms, or just a facade? And more importantly, can this be said about me, about you? Have you ever stopped to think about how this applies to our lives today? Look around. How many times do we do things not because we believe in them, but because we want to be seen in a certain way? How many times do we put on masks, even spiritual ones, to be accepted? I believe this is the point of tension we are living in now. We are a society obsessed with external validation, but starving for internal meaning. We are trapped in this constant dance of showing and hiding. But the question I want to ask you today is, what if we didn't need to dance? And if true spiritual freedom is not in everything we do to be seen, but in what we choose to be when no one is watching? Have you thought about it? What do you really seek deep in your heart? This question can change everything. In the next few minutes, I want to invite you to reflect on what it means to live an authentic life. Not a life of appearances, but a life that truly matters. I want to show you that even in the midst of such a noisy world, it is possible to find a profound silence that transforms. And more importantly, I want to explore how this silence can begin right now with you. Have you ever had that moment when you read something and feel like it was written just for you? Something so true and uncomfortable that it forces you to pause, take a deep breath, and confront parts of yourself that you would rather ignore. That's exactly how I felt the first time I read Matthew 7:21-23. These words are not easy. They are like a mirror that reflects not only who we are on the outside, but who we truly are on the inside. Jesus tells us something surprising, that not everyone who calls him Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. He speaks about people who did incredible things in his name, prophesied, cast out demons, performed miracles, and yet he states, I never knew you. Think with me. How is this possible? How can someone do so much, apparently, for the kingdom of God, and yet be so far from him? That question left me unsettled. Because if we are honest, this not only confronts the lives of others, but forces us to look at our own motivations. Look around. We are living in a time where visible actions seem to matter more than invisible intentions. It is common to measure success by what we can show, the number of followers, likes, or even how many grand projects we have managed to accomplish. And this doesn't happen only at work or on social media. This mentality often seeps into our spiritual life. For example, how many times do we participate in a religious event not because we want to connect with God, but because we want to be seen as people of faith? How many times do we say the right words in a prayer, but our heart is somewhere else? It's as if we're playing a role, performing a performance, while what God really desires is something much deeper. He wants to know us. And this is the uncomfortable truth of Matthew 7:21-23. He is not saying that miracles, prophecies, or good works are not important. On the contrary, they are valuable when they flow from a transformed heart. But what Jesus warns us about is that these external actions, by themselves, do not guarantee a real connection with God. It's not about what we do to impress others, but about who we are before Him. And this brings us to a crucial point. Are we confusing the visible with the essential? Are we so focused on what we can show that we forget what really matters? A sincere relationship, an authentic faith, an obedience that comes from the heart. I believe this verse challenges us to stop and reflect, not just about how we are living our faith, but about how we are living our life as a whole. Are we moving in the right direction, or are we just running in circles, trapped in a routine that doesn't reflect what really matters? In the next few minutes, I want to invite you to explore this idea with me. Let's look beyond appearances, beyond performances, and seek to understand what it means to be known by God. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what we do for others to see, but what we are in His eyes. Have you ever found yourself thinking, do I really live what I believe? Not just saying or doing things that seem right, but living in a way that truly reflects what is in your heart. Maybe this question seems uncomfortable. And do you know why? Because it forces us to face what we often prefer to avoid, the difference between what we show the world and who we are when no one is watching. But let me tell you something. This is the most liberating question you can ask yourself. When I read Matthew 7:21-23, I feel as if Jesus is speaking directly to me, as if He is holding a mirror in front of me, challenging me to look beyond the surface. He's not just asking us to do good deeds. He's calling us to a radical transformation, something that starts from the inside out. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Do you know what impresses me the most about this text? He reminds us that God is not interested in what we do to be seen. He is interested in what we do because we love Him. And that changes everything. Think about it. In a world where we are constantly trying to be relevant, recognized, or even admired, here is God telling us that none of that matters if it doesn't come from a sincere heart. So how do we live this? How to move from superficiality to a place of authenticity? Well, it starts with 3 words: intention, action, and transformation. 1. Intention. Let's start with the why. Why do we do what we do? Is it to impress others, to gain approval, or because we truly want to reflect God's character? Sometimes, even good deeds can have the wrong motivations. Maybe you help someone because you expect something in return, or because you want to be seen as a good person. But God calls us to something deeper. He calls us to love, to forgive, to serve, not because we want recognition, but because we understand how much He loved us first. This is something that no one can pretend. It's genuine, it's authentic. 2. Action. Now, let's talk about what we do, Because intention without action is just an idea, and action without true intention can become empty. The Bible shows us that faith without works is dead. But here's the point. These actions don't need to be spectacular to be meaningful. You don't need to be on stage to impact lives. Small gestures, like listening to someone who is suffering, helping a neighbor in need, or even forgiving an offense, have incredible power. God cares more about the sincerity of these gestures than their size. 3. Transformation. And here is the most challenging part. Transformation is not an event, it is a process. It's something that happens day after day when we allow God to work in us. And do you know what is more incredible? He doesn't expect us to be perfect, He just wants us to be willing. When we set aside our pride, our need to control everything, and allow God to shape our hearts, we begin to see real changes. It's not easy, but it's liberating, because the more we become like Him, the more we feel true, whole, complete. Now, I want to challenge you. Stop for a moment and think, what are the things you are doing just to keep up appearances? Which areas of your life need a real change? It can be scary to face these issues, but I want to remind you of one thing. God is not asking for perfection. From you, He is asking you for honesty. He is calling you to be authentic, to live in a way that reflects what you truly believe. And do you know what's the most beautiful thing? When we start living like this, something incredible happens. Our faith stops being something we just say or show. It becomes something others feel when they are around us. Because authenticity is contagious. When we are true, we inspire others to be true as well. So what are you going to do starting today? Are you going to continue living for appearances, or are you going to take the first step towards a deeper, more sincere, more transformative faith? It doesn't have to be something grand. Start with a small gesture. Maybe it's a time of silent prayer, asking God to reveal areas of your life that need to change. Or perhaps it is seeking reconciliation with someone you have been avoiding. Whatever it is, remember, God sees your heart, and that's what really matters. We are together on this journey. And if you are here now, it's because something inside you is seeking more. So don't ignore that call. Embrace it. Allow it to transform not just what you do, but who you are. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt tired, even without knowing? Exactly why. It's that kind of fatigue that goes beyond the physical. It seems like your mind is constantly busy, but you can't identify with what. You know, I think this has a lot to do with the world we live in today. We are connected all the time, but somehow it seems like we've never been so disconnected. Think about social media, for example. They are an incredible tool, right? We can connect with people on the other side of the world, learn new things, share moments. But at the same time, how many times have you spent hours scrolling through the feed without even realizing it? And, in the end, did you feel like you wasted time without gaining anything in return? I'm not here to demonize technology. After all, it can also be used for good, to spread powerful messages like the one I'm sharing with you now. But here's the question. Are we allowing digital distractions to dominate our lives? Are we trading real connections for superficial interactions? Jesus said something profound in Matthew 6:21. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I believe this applies perfectly to the digital world we live in. What has been occupying your heart lately? Your notifications, followers and likes, or something deeper, more lasting? Look around you. We are surrounded by stimuli that demand our attention. A new video, a new post, a new message. And do you know what that does? Keeps our mind occupied, but our heart empty. Because these things, although momentarily satisfying, do not nourish our soul. They only fill the silence with noise. And that's where the question of spirituality comes in. Maybe, like me, you have noticed that it is in this silence that something a powerful happens. Not an uncomfortable silence, but that space where we can finally hear what God is trying to tell us. It is a place where we can reflect, reassess, and, more importantly, reconnect with what truly matters. But how do we do this in such a noisy world? The answer begins with intentionality. It's not easy, I know. I myself have lost count of how many times I opened my phone to do something useful and ended up being sucked into videos or messages. But over time, I realized that it was possible to create moments of pause, not perfect, but sincere. For example, how about starting the day by putting your phone aside for a few minutes and instead opening the Bible? It can be something as simple as a verse, but at the moment you choose that, you are telling the world, my priority is different. Or how about using technology to your advantage? There are amazing apps that send reminders to pray, help with Bible reading, or connect people in study groups. The truth is that we don't need to reject technology, but we need to learn to use it without being used by it. Because in the end, what God wants from us is simple, a willing heart. He is not counting how many followers you have or how many likes you received. He is looking at you, at the choices you make, even when no one is watching. So, I want to challenge you to make a choice today. Take a moment to disconnect from the digital world and connect with something greater. Maybe you feel like opening the Bible. Maybe it's spending a few minutes in silence, praying or reflecting. Whatever it is, make it a priority, because it is in this space that you will find the peace and direction you are looking for. And do you know what is more incredible? When you choose that pause, when you take that small step towards God, He responds, not in a spectacular or noisy way, but in a whisper that speaks directly to your heart. It is there that you realize, distractions will never fill the void, but His presence can. We are in this together. It's not easy, but it's possible. And every choice you make to prioritize what really matters is a victory for you, for your faith, and for your life. Shall we start today? If you've made it this far, I want you to know one thing. This is not by chance. All these reflections, these challenges, and even the discomfort you may have felt throughout this video have a purpose. They are here to remind you of something very important. God is not interested in the appearance of things. He is interested in your heart. I know this may seem heavy. Sometimes the idea of such a profound transformation can seem daunting. But here's the good news. You don't have to do it alone. Every small step you take towards an authentic faith is accompanied by God's grace and love. He doesn't expect you to be perfect. He only expects you to be willing. Think for a moment about everything we've talked about how how we live in a world that pushes us to seek external approval, to get lost in distractions and superficialities. About how Matthew 7:21-23 challenges us to look beyond appearances and seek something deeper. About the need to disconnect ourselves from the world's expectations and connect with what truly matters. Now, I want you to look at your life and ask, what does this mean to me? Maybe you are realizing that you have been working hard to maintain an image, but you feel that something is still missing. Maybe you feel that your faith has become more about rituals than about relationship. Or maybe you are simply seeking a greater meaning, a purpose that goes beyond what this world can offer. If that is your case, know that you are not alone. We are all on this journey of discovering what it means to live a true faith. The beauty of it all is that God is not waiting for grand gestures. He is waiting for you exactly where you are. Right now, He wants you to start where you are with what you have. It can be a simple moment of prayer, an honest conversation with Him, or even the decision to open the Bible and seek answers. Whatever it is, start. And remember, authenticity begins in the small things. It begins when we choose to be honest with ourselves about who we are and what we truly seek. It begins when we decide that pleasing God is more important than impressing others. And little by little, this authenticity transforms into something greater. It becomes the foundation of a life that reflects God's love, grace, and truth. I want to leave you with a challenge. Take a moment, even today, to reflect. Maybe it's writing in a journal or just sitting in silence. Ask yourself, what is God trying to tell me? What is He calling me to change? And when you hear the answer, do not be afraid to act, because it is in this space of vulnerability that real transformation happens. Now, before we wrap up, I want to invite you to be part of something bigger. This channel is a space where we discuss topics that challenge, inspire, and transform. If this video spoke to your heart, if it made you reflect in some way, I encourage you to subscribe. Click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any content. Here, you will always find messages that will help you grow in your spiritual journey. And one more thing, share your journey. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what touched you the most in this video? Is there something you are working on in your spiritual life right now? I read every comment because I believe that together we can learn from each other and grow as a community. Remember, God has called you to something greater. He has called you to live an authentic life, a life that reflects His light and His love. So don't be afraid to take the next step. Start today, exactly where you are, and I will be here, along with you, on this journey. May God bless you, and see you in the next video.